This is Legalease, where the law is always on your side. Now introducing your host, a longtime veteran of the courts, Dennis Wilenchik.
Welcome to Legalease. This is Jack Wilenchik, and I've got Dennis here right by my side. Today on the show, we're going to start the show talking to Ben Quayle, who's kind enough to call in from the floor of the House out there in D.C., and later on the show, we'll be talking about the tragedy in Colorado. And finishing out the show, we're going to be talking gun rights and taking some calls on how you feel about your right to bear arms. So let's start off talking to Ben Quayle. Representative Quayle, are you on the line?
Yep, I'm here.
Good to have you on the show again. I know you're here just a few weeks back talking about Fast and Furious. Maybe you'd like to give us an update on what's going on there.
Well, I mean, we continue to try to put pressure on the administration to hand over the subpoenaed documents. Obviously, the executive privilege was invoked by the president. The tactic that we used was two-pronged with the contempt proceedings. One was congressional contempt, which went through the House, and then the U.S. Attorney's Office, which we believed was going to happen, said that they're not going to go through and convene a grand jury against Eric Holder. And so that's why we had to also do a civil contempt, so that we can actually appoint an attorney to actually go into civil court and then use the court process to actually try to get the documents that we have subpoenaed. And this will actually make the president and the administration actually have to go through and give us reasoning why presidential privilege exists for each document, because as we learned from Nixon, you can't just invoke presidential privilege just to cover up a wrongdoing. So we're still pursuing that. We just want to continue to get to the bottom of this so that we can figure out who knew what, when, and why this operation was put into place, and also to find that information out for the Terry family, because we do have a slain Border Patrol agent.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think you're ever going to get some kind of response, helpful response from the administration here? You think they're ever going to produce these documents?
Not unless you come up with court pressure and the requirement of it. The administration, I believe, realizes that these documents are damaging, and so they're going to try to block it every step of the way. But we need to continue to go through with this, even after, if we have a new administration next year, because we need to get to the bottom of this, and we need to understand. And Terry's family deserves answers to why Brian was killed.
Yeah, let me ask you this, Representative Quayle. This is Dennis Wilenchik. I get this question asked to me a lot by people on this. You guys voted the way you voted. He basically shrugged it off. And what is the effect of this, basically? Now you got to go to court and probably be stymied for, another year till after the election. So is the process that you're hiring someone now to go to district court, file, formal contempt proceedings?
Yes, it's a civil contempt proceeding.
And then I assume they're going to try, as I said, to basically drag this out as long as they can. What's your take on that? Do you have any special insight into that as to how long this is going to take before they finally can resolve it? Or is this going to be something where the court just drags it out until the election perceives it to be political?
Well, it is going to take time, and that's why we were so frustrated and wanted to get to the bottom and wanted cooperation from the administration. And this isn't, the first time that the judicial route is going to be taken, and that's one of the biggest issues that I have with this administration, is that they've consistently gone beyond the statutory authority that was given to them via statute for the executive branch on numerous different laws. Mm-hmm. And our only repercussion is through the court challenges, whether it was the immigration issue that Napolitano did, whether the HHS waiver for work for welfare, whether it was the appointments for CFPB with Richard Cordry and the NLRB folks, whether it's the NLRB's actions that they've been taking, whether it's the EPA's actions. It's time and time again. That's why.
Well, no, I don't think it's political in that sense. I'm just saying I think that they're trying to make it sound like it's political, but it's really not. I mean, it's a constitutional principle here at stake. And
correct.
My other quick question is, does the Justice Department get to represent Eric Holder in this, whereas you guys got to go out and hire separate counsel? Because generally, I would think, I'm not as familiar with the federal system as I am with the state, but the Justice Department should theoretically be representing the government, which would include the Congress, I would think. But in this case, they're conflicted out. Shouldn't they be conflicted out of representing him as well?
I believe that he has to get outside counsel, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Yeah, because I think if he gets outside counsel, it certainly helps a lot. Maybe somebody would independently counsel him.
Right. Yeah, and I'm almost positive that you do have to get outside counsel because you can't have a U.S. attorney actually adjudicating this.
That's what I would think. So that may be helpful to the process, I would hope, because that attorney might be independent and have some idea of trying to resolve it.
Right. Well, and just to make that point again for the independence, I mean, if you look at the intel leaks, Attorney General Holder appointed two U.S. attorneys. One was a bundler for President Obama's campaign, and we've been calling, I've Bill and Senator McCain as well, to appoint an independent prosecutor because these people are conflicted out because they're not going to want to actually find damaging evidence against the administration.
Yeah, I think that's obvious. Anyway, thanks for that insight.
Yeah.
Moving on, Representative Quayle, I see you've got a new bill out, the Sunshine for Regulatory Decrees and Settlements Act. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, this is actually, we're debating it right now, so I got to go back down to the floor here soon to argue against various amendments that are trying to gut the bill.
Mm-hmm.
But this is my bill is part of a package to really try to rein in the overly burdensome regulatory environment that we have right now. And my piece of the legislation deals with sue and settlement agreements and consent decrees. And it's kind of an area that not many people know that this is where the most burdensome regulations actually come to fruition. So what happens, the process is something like this, is that an outside group, many times it's a radical environmental group, lobbies Congress to get a rule put into a statute with an artificially short timeline for when that rule needs to be written. When that lapses, then they sue that agency. And then behind closed doors, usually, the Department of Justice gets a settlement agreement that becomes law, that becomes the rule, without any input from those that are going to be affected by the rule. And one of the other bad parts of it is that since it went through the judicial process, it's extraordinarily difficult for subsequent administrations to actually repeal it or change it because it went through the judicial process. So what mine does, it goes back to the days when Ed Meese was Attorney General, and he had a thing called the Meese Memo, and it brings some transparency to this process. It allows people or groups that are going to be affected by these regulations to actually get a seat at the table during the process, so they can actually have their voices be heard during the settlement agreements. And also, it makes it a lot easier for future administrations to change and alter these rules that are made. Because some of the things that come in, they actually sue. The complaint is filed on the same day that the settlement agreement is filed. So there's no chance for comment by these people. And some of the most egregious ones, utility MAC, greenhouse gases, and one of the ones for regional haze that's going to be affecting Arizona, it's going to drive up costs. Some estimates are say 20-30% if it goes into full implementation, 20-30% increase in electricity costs in Arizona, and about 15 to 20% increase in water costs because they're just trying to get rid of coal-generating power stations.
Yeah, real quick before our break, Representative Quayle, how long a period of time then would it be that the public would have an opportunity to comment? Because I could see that also being a problem in holding up settlements and consents.
Well, in this, they actually, with this bill, if it goes into effect, they actually get involved in the process right from the very beginning. They have to post the complaint, and so they get involved in the process. And then even after that, once the agreement is reached, because the court's involved, the interveners, who are those who are going to be regulated, the complainant and the Department of Justice and the agency, after that is actually agreed to, then there's public comment on top of that.
All right, well, we're going to come back after the break. You're going to stay with us just for a few more minutes,
Yep.
Aaron. And this is part of the Red Tape Reduction and Small Business Job Creation Act. We're talking with Representative Ben Quayle. We'll be talking about other topics as well after this break.
Breaking the law, breaking the law, breaking the law, breaking the law.
Welcome back to Legalease. This is Jack Wilenchik, along with Dennis Wilenchik. We're talking to Representative Ben Quayle, who's joined us from the floor of the House. And right before we went to the break, we are talking about Representative Quayle's new bill, the Sunshine for Regulatory Decrees and Settlements Act. And I think we'll move on to another topic here. We should talk a little bit about...
Come on, Jack, that was so exciting, though. Really in the intricacies of consent decrees.
Yeah, well, we'll watch you on TV tonight on C-SPAN. Yeah. We'll catch it on C-SPAN. All right.
Put everybody to sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, moving
well, but
on
you know
to,
what? Honestly, though, the red tape reduction in small business job creation, which sounds great. Can you give us any quick insight on what that is, actually?
Yeah, it's a compilation of a number of different bills. The underlying bill basically says no new major regulations can be implemented until unemployment goes below 6%. Now, there are some carve-outs in terms of with national security or any other issues, and there's a whole other catch-all provision that says, look, if the president and the administration thinks that a bill that has an economic impact of a rule of an economic impact of $100 million or more, if he thinks that that's good to go through before 6% unemployment, then he can send it to the House floor for an up or down vote, and we'll put it through that way.
Okay. And so how did this consent thing become part of that particular bill of all things?
Well, basically, these are about 5 or 6 bills that all deal with regulation. And with the sue and settle agreements and the consent decrees, this has been one of the areas where the Obama administration has been able to go the back route to more stringent regulations and not go through the normal process. And most of like Clinton didn't do it this way, Bush didn't do it this way, and Reagan didn't do it this way.
Amazing. Okay, well, Jack is now going to go on to another topic.
Why don't we talk about what's all over the news right now, what happened in Aurora, Colorado. I'd like to ask you where you stand personally on gun control and gun rights.
Well, gun rights it's in the Second Amendment. It's an individual right. And it's a tragedy what happened in Colorado. And I've talked to the congressman who represents that area and around that area, and a lot of them knew people who know people who were in the theater and that, and it's a tragedy what happened. But when you have this type of an event, it's not good to make a flippant reaction and saying that right now we got to start pushing for further gun control, because I've said before is that you can't regulate away evil. Evil happens. It's unfortunate that it happens, but there are evil people out there like that guy in Colorado, and so those type of people will find ways to cause harm, and we just have to try to do our best to stop it before he actually does it. And I don't think that making more restrictive gun laws is going to solve the problem.
Do you feel that the legislature has any kind of role in solving the problem, which, as I see it, is these recurring mass attacks by people with assault rifles and with guns?
I guess that's really the issue we're getting to. Is that, I hear every word you're saying, and I applaud it. In fact, today my wife is out buying a gun, But the reality is there's a difference between buying a pistol to defend yourself and so forth and buying an assault weapon, which really isn't kind of necessary to do so, right? So I think that's really where the debate is, isn't it?
Well, the debate also has to be of, if you're going to put those laws into place, who is going to abide by them? Law-abiding citizens who, if they were given the opportunity to buy those guns, would use them in the proper fashion.
That's, I guess, the question, Representative Quayle, is does anybody need to use an assault weapon in a proper fashion? I guess that's the issue. Are we going too far with that? In other words, I can understand weaponry to protect yourself. Clearly, I have guns myself, and I applaud that. But, when you're talking about, these kind of assault rifles and so forth, it's not for hunting and it's not for protection. It's really for some other purpose, isn't it?
Well, it could be for protection. It could be for target shooting. It could be for sport like that.
Well, so can a hand grenade, I guess. But, at some point, do we have to draw a line? Let me ask you something on that. And I recognize these are just, sort of issues that, no one knows the answer to, really, so I'm not trying to be difficult.
Right.
But is this guy evil in your mind, or is he mentally ill? Because there's a difference. What we've seen with Loeffner and this kind of guy is, I don't know if they're evil or just crazy,
Well, we don't know yet.
Yeah.
What he did was evil. And we don't know if he's mentally unstable or what have you. And then there's another debate on what do we do about mental health in our country.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think has been misunderstood and kind of cast by the wayside.
Yeah, I agree with you.
and that's something that we really need to look at.
Well, you know what we really need to look at in that regard, since you're in Congress, is, and I'm not sure it's Congress's responsibility necessarily, but I think the real issue, if you'll permit me, is that, there are mentally ill people walking the streets, and you can't do anything about it until they do something crazy like this, And that's really where the problem is. You can't put them away necessarily just because they're mentally ill. There are people walking the streets who are effectively, walking time bombs. But my understanding is you just can't incarcerate them and you can't institutionalize them until they actually do something.
Correct. And I've read some studies on this because it has piqued my interest. I've read some studies because I think the law changed, I think, back in the 70s, especially on the state level, where you can't institutionalize somebody unless they're going to cause harm to somebody or themselves.
Yeah.
And then you saw the rate of homelessness skyrocket.
Right.
And a good portion of the people who are homeless and living on the street do have paranoid schizophrenia. They are bipolar. They have some mental illness, and they can't be taken into an institution against their will unless they do something or are perceived to be able to do something.
Exactly.
So those are some of the things. I don't know if you do that on the federal level. At probably state level, that we need to relook at and look at the studies that are done. I'm not an expert in this, and I don't.
No, I understand, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot. It's just it's a real problem because this thing, like you said, and I think you said it well. This is going to happen again, regardless of what laws you put into effect. The laws are irrelevant to something like this. Somebody's going to get their hands on something to harm somebody if they're mentally unstable, whether it's a pen or it could be anything.
Or an incendiary device.
Right. So I agree with you that I think people tend to jump to these quick conclusions like, well, let's go to gun control, but that's not probably going to stop anything like this. I agree. I really tend to agree with you. It's just a knee-jerk reaction.
Right.
I was just in New York, as a matter of fact. Mayor Bloomberg was on TV there when I was there talking about this. This is a perfect example, he said, of why we need gun control. Well, it's not. I mean, it's just another crazy loon. And there are probably many more of them out there.
Well, and he wants to ban ownership of handguns as well. And if you look at what's going on in Chicago right now, where they have some of the most restrictive gun bans, and yet their murder rate by guns is one of the highest in the nation, and they're going through a murder spree right now, which is one of the worst in its history.
Yeah. Again, these are eternal questions, and I'm not sure that. I think in times of these kinds of events, we look to politicians such as yourself to give us answers, and you try, certainly, I know, but I don't know that there is an answer in fairness to people.
And that's the thing, is that, when you live in a free society, sometimes there aren't the answers unless you're going to infringe on people's freedoms.
Right.
It sounds callous, but, sometimes these sorts of things happen. And you can't regulate that away. You can't pass a law to get rid of those things. You try to stop it as best as you can, and you try to educate people about mental illness, about right from wrong. But it's not the duty of centralized government to do that. A lot of it has to do with family and church and all that.
Yeah. Well, in our next segment, we're going to have actually a reporter, I guess, from NBC, right, Jack?
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to talk about this whole incident. He's been reporting it for NBC News nationally. But let me ask you this, because we just have a few minutes. What's in store for you over the next few months? I know you're in a campaign now, and you are fighting, I guess, in a new district, right?
Yeah, it's 60. It's mostly my district. My current district's about 2/3 my current district. So every district's new after redistricting, but this is a large proportion of my current district.
Yeah, and so you're in a primary battle right now as we speak, right?
Yep.
And so, are you coming back to Arizona? I know you're in Washington now, and you'll be on the floor soon. But what are your plans over the next few months over the hot summer? Are you going to be back here?
Oh yeah, well I come back every weekend. My wife and daughter live there, and so I just commute back and forth.
Okay.
And so I'll be back. We go into summer recess in the beginning of August, and then so I'll be back for that month of August.
Well, let me ask. I know you're a guy that likes to go door to door and get out there and, and meet people, and it's a wonderful thing you do. But what is the topic out there, if you can, pinpoint before our break here? What is the thing on everyone's mind out there that you see as a political candidate as well as a sitting congressman that really is on people's minds right now.
Well, first of all, I tried to go door to door on Saturday afternoon when that dust storm went in.
Oh,
not a good idea.
Right, not good.
But I think it changes. Right after the Supreme Court rulings, both on SB 1070 and Obamacare, there's a lot of attention on the SB 1070 and then what Janet Napolitano did and the president did. There still is a lot of talk, obviously, with the economy, with the amount of debt that we're accumulating. But I think it's basically an overall, worry of people that if we don't fix the big issues that we have right now in front of us, whether it's the debt with deficit, the economy, and really just the overall functioning of America and going back to what made us strong, they don't think that their kids are going to have the same opportunities that they did.
Yeah.
And that is, and you see that. I mean, when I talk to people, you see that in their eyes.
Yeah.
And it's really palpable.
Yeah, it's changed. Things have changed, and people see it, and it's scary to them. Well, we got to take our break now, Congressman Quayle, and we're going to be talking, as I said, after this with NBC News reporter Bob Constantini. We thank you so much for appearing on the show. I know you've got a busy schedule, and you're going back on the floor to talk about that consent bill.
Exciting consent
that exciting
bill.
consent bill.
Exactly.
But
thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you so much, okay?
Bye.
Take care. Be good. All right, we'll be back after these important news messages.